A drizzling rain pattered against the high, arched windows of my late uncle's estate when I first found the music box. It was late afternoon, a thin gloom settled over the corridors, and my footsteps echoed with a ghostly urgency as I ventured deeper into the building's hushed recesses. Dust motes floated in the feeble light streaming through narrow panes, giving the illusion that the entire mansion was slowly drifting through a sea of shadows. The winding hallway led me to a tight spiral staircase that opened onto the attic. There, pressed against a far wall, I spotted an old trunk stamped with my family crest. The trunk smelled of musty leather and time itself. Inside, among tattered letters, brass candlesticks, and faded daguerreotypes, lay a small wooden box wrapped in brittle velvet. Its surface was polished, but the varnish had cracked in thin web-like lines, suggesting an age beyond living memory. I felt a faint trembling in my fingertips when I lifted the lid. A gentle lullaby tinkled forth, the notes pure yet unsettling, resonating with a strangely insistent rhythm. The melody was slow, each chime beckoning me to lean closer. The more I listened, the more I sensed a subtle shift in the air around me. The attic's shadows grew sharper. The corners that had once been dark were suddenly swallowing more of the wan light, expanding as if claiming the space. My curiosity mingled with apprehension, but I could not stop myself from winding the tiny key on the side of the music box once more, compelled by a powerful tension I could not name. The second time the melody played, I swear the reflection in a dusty mirror across the room wavered, the glass rippling as if it were liquid. I retreated from the trunk, aware that something intangible had stirred. When I descended from the attic that evening, the music box still clasped in my hands, I heard faint steps mirroring my own. In the gloom, the sense of being followed took root in my mind, though every time I glanced over my shoulder, I found only the yawning emptiness of the corridor. Once safely back in my bedroom, I placed the box on my old oak desk, intending to study it under better light, but the desk lamp provided no comfort. The light merely revealed the music box's intricate carvings, serpentine shapes etched in gold filigree, a series of lines and twists that made no immediate sense. One of these patterns formed what appeared to be a narrow, ornate keyhole on the box's underside, but the key itself was missing, if it had ever existed at all. Sleep that night was elusive. The lullaby's echo haunted me, seeming to play just at the edge of hearing. At times, I thought I heard the gentle hiss of movement against the mirror on the opposite wall, as though a pale hand might slide down the glass from the inside. My dreams were plagued by swirling reflections. Within them, I saw a gaunt, pallid figure drifting behind the mirror, wearing a tattered shroud. Its eyes were sunken, yet stared with an insatiable hunger. I startled awake in the great pre-dawn light, drenched in sweat. The room was quiet, but a discernible chill lingered in the air, clinging to my skin. The mirror across from my bed momentarily looked lifeless, as if it had swallowed the faint glow of morning. I could almost swear I saw the faintest outline of a face pressed against the inside. In the days that followed, I took every spare moment to investigate the music box. I turned to my uncle's old library, packed with leather-bound tomes and dusty manuscripts. His journals mention an antique item rumored to be cursed, a relic said to open a pathway to a realm of reflections and illusions. Apparently, the lullaby served as a kind of invitation, a beacon to something on the other side of the mirror, summoning it forth. One passage in my uncle's notes recounted a family ancestor who became obsessed with the music box. She had been found locked in a small mirrored room, the music box placed at her feet, eyes wide and unblinking. She was alive, but only just. When rescued, she muttered about a pale shape that whispered and rapped on the inside of every reflective surface, yearning to break free. At night, the house took on a new menace. The lullaby seemed to replay itself in unexpected moments. I would be walking past a hallway mirror and hear a distant tinkling of the same unsettling melody. I began placing sheets over every mirror in the estate, a futile attempt to ward away the sense of constant observation. A certain restlessness infected me, a compulsion to keep the music box near. My grandfather's old writing desk in the study became my refuge, the largest room I could find without mirrors. There, behind locked doors, I examined the box, under the flicker of candlelight, breathing in the faint odor of wax and old ink. I worked the mechanism. Its tiny gears, rods, and cylinder were cunningly. However, the carvings still baffled me, each swirl hinting at hidden shapes that resembled silhouettes and elongated faces. I discovered one evening that if I wound the box in a specific way, a hidden compartment sprang open beneath the lid's inlay. Inside, I found an ink drawing of a figure standing before a massive mirror, arms extended, coaxing a reflection out of the glass. The reflection, however, looked ghastly. Its face elongated, the limbs unnaturally slender, and its mouth slightly parted in what might have been a silent plea or cry. Below the drawing was a set of archaic notations, half in Latin, half in a script I couldn't decipher. I realized with dawning horror that the lullaby playing from the box was the same tune indicated by the cryptic notes. I could almost hear my heart pounding in that hush, and in a surge of dread, I shut the box. Yet I knew my fear would not quell the curiosity gnawing at me. That same night, as the candle on my desk burned down to a nub, I heard a sudden scraping noise outside my door. It couldn't have been the wind. The corridor was fully enclosed. My breathing turned shallow and I braced myself, rushing to the door and opening it. My candlelight spilled onto the hallway floor, revealing only emptiness, but the hush felt loaded, a presence waiting just beyond the flicker of light. I stepped out, casting a glance at a large mirror further down the corridor, one I had neglected to cover. My reflection stared back at me, but the glass seemed slightly tarnished and murky. I almost turned away when I noticed another shape behind my reflection, pale, gaunt, its hand lifting slowly within the mirror's depths. Its eyes were shadowed hollows. I let out a strangled cry, stumbling back against the wall, the candle slipping from my hand, plunging me into darkness. By the time I groped to pick it up again and relight it, the mirror showed only my trembling figure. I fled to my bedroom and barricaded the door with a chair, but I could feel the weight of that figure's stare on me, even after I crawled into bed. Unable to sleep, I found myself humming the lullaby, trembling at the resonance that lingered in the still air. At some point in the early hours, exhaustion overcame my fear, and I dozed off. Morning offered little comfort. The estate's corridors were bathed in cold light, showing the cracks in the wallpaper and the spider webs bridging corners of the ceiling. I resolved to dig deeper into my uncle's notes, seeking any ritual or method he might have uncovered to banish the presence from the mirrors. In a more remote section of the library, hidden behind a locked cabinet, I discovered a small, hand-stitched grimoire. Its cramped, spidery writing enumerated superstitions, charms, and incantations for warding away evil. One passage, cryptic but potent, described how mirrors could serve as portals, and a certain resonance such as a lullaby could act as a summons. It warned that once a reflection had been invited, the boundary between the physical world and the mirror realm would grow thin. The writer claimed that the only way to break the bond was to close the path by destroying the key to that realm. But the final note read, "Beware, for once destroyed, the spirit that beckons may remain unmoored, forever free to roam the living world." Restlessness led me to wander the corridors at twilight again, searching for an answer that might rid me of the box, but also compelled to keep it close. My footsteps led me to a family portrait gallery. The narrow faces and dark clothes of my ancestors seemed to watch, disapproving. I studied each figure in the paintings, trying to see if there was some hint of that pale reflection among them. Then I heard it again, the lullaby. Faint but unmistakable, though the music box remained shut in my hands. The notes carried from somewhere deeper in the manor. Heart pounding, I followed the sound to a room lined with 3 tall mirrors that faced one another. creating an infinite corridor of glass. I froze in the doorway, sick with dread at the thought of stepping into that reflective labyrinth. Yet the lullaby persisted, sweet and haunting. Each note tugged at my senses like a puppet string. My breath quickened, and I inched forward, holding the music box at my side. Candlelight wavered on the expanse of mirrored surfaces, forging countless reflections of me from every angle. At first, all seemed normal, my breath ragged, my eyes wide with fear. But in the very far mirrors, something else moved among the reflections. The spectral figure advanced from deeper within that endless corridor, drifting closer. It wore a tattered garment reminiscent of a funeral shroud, and its long fingers reached outward. Where my reflection should have been, I saw it. As if it had taken my place in the deeper layers of glass, its lips parted slightly, shaping a soundless word. I realized, with dawning horror, that it was coaxing me to enter. A silent invitation. Paralysis gripped me, but something deeper stirred, a bizarre sense of fascination. I took another step into the center of the mirror-lined room. The lullaby swelled, although the music box remained silent in my hand. Only then did I notice the reflection of the box in the glass. There, in the mirror, it was open, its spinning cylinder turning, the delicate metal tines plucking at invisible strings. Meanwhile, the real box in my hands stayed firmly shut. I glanced from the closed lid to the reflection, which remained open and turning. My pulse hammered, and perspiration gathered on my forehead. As I raised my gaze to the mirror directly before me, the pale figure now stood just behind my shoulder in the reflection, closer than before. As if it had bridged an impossible gap, I felt a wave of cold against my back, though nothing touched me in the real room. Its elongated fingers hovered near the top of my shoulder in the reflection. Though my own reflection was absent from that glass, only the figure and the open music box visible. My mind dizzied with fear. The hush deepened, so thick and charged that when the figure's bony hand appeared to rest upon my reflection's shoulder, I gasped and jumped back. The chain reaction of terror made me pivot on my heel and dash from the room, nearly toppling a candelabra. The lullaby's final notes shimmered behind me, trailing into silence as the door slammed shut between the mirrors and me. I retreated to my bedroom, heart still pounding. Thoughts of smashing the box came to me, but the cryptic warning about unleashing the reflection entirely into our realm stopped me cold. I needed a more certain solution, a way to force the entity back before severing the link. Feebly, I remembered the tattered grimoire, which hinted at a binding ritual. Though I was no practitioner of arcane arts, desperation and isolation had worn me down. The full moon loomed that night, and I decided I would attempt anything to contain the spirit. By the time the moon rose, I had gathered candles, a drawn circle of chalk, and the cursed box, placing them all on the dusty floor of the old dining hall, the largest open space in the estate. I pushed aside the heavy table and chairs, clearing a wide area. A monstrous mirror rested on one wall, and though I had covered most of the house's mirrors, this one stood too large to move alone. It seemed fitting, if unnerving, to place the circle before it. Perhaps I could force the vile figure back through that very mirror. Seconds before midnight, I lit the candles, forming a ring of flickering flames around me. The lullaby pulsed in my memory. My voice faltered as I attempted to recite words from the grimoire, Latin phrases that made my tongue feel sluggish and heavy. Fear roiled in my stomach. I wound the music box's key gently, once, twice, thrice, and as the lullaby began, a wave of dizziness descended upon me. Candle flames bent inward. I felt the presence intensify behind the glass. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the sheets slip. The cloth covering the mirror peeled away, drawn by an unseen hand, revealing an inky darkness behind the glass. The lullaby seeped through every pore in my skin, and I struggled to keep chanting the final lines of the incantation. The reflection in the mirror greeted me with an alien tapestry of swirling shadows. The pale figure manifested once more, stepping forward, its eyes like dull lamps set in a hollow face, its arms extended in a beckoning gesture. Surges of cold air rippled outward, extinguishing the row of candles. The circle I had chalked on the floor glowed faintly for an instant, but then fizzled, as if overshadowed by a deeper power. I watched in horror as the figure pressed a long hand against the inside of the mirror. The glass yielded, bending like liquid, and a skeletal hand emerged into the reality of the dining hall. My muscles locked with terror, unable to run or even call out. The figure's face was half protruding, its expression at once mournful and predatory. Droplets of mirror-like silver dripped from its body, as if it were shedding the barrier that separated us. The lullaby grew more erratic, warbling in dissonant chords. I realized that if I did nothing, it would fully cross over. With trembling hands, I seized the music box and drew a deep breath. Recalling the warnings scribbled in the grimoire, I recognized my only chance. I had to destroy the lure before it fully escaped. Yet I also knew that the act could free the spirit completely. Still, waiting any longer risked letting it slip through on its own terms, unstoppable, driven by a mixture of dread and fierce determination. I raised the music box and smashed it against the stone floor. The delicate mechanism snapped with a brittle cry, the wooden casing splintering. Fragments of gear and cylinder scattered around me. The lullaby died in mid-phrase, replaced by a resounding silence that felt too heavy to bear. For an instant, the figure in the mirror paused, as though struck by an unseen force. Its half-emerged body quivered, the mirror surface throbbing around it. A strangled, voiceless howl thundered in my head, though my ears registered nothing but suffocating quiet. The reflection convulsed, and the figure sank back into the dark surface, as if forcibly pulled inside. The air was thick, trembling with a chaotic energy. Then, in a violent ripple, the glass stabilized. The sheet fluttered from where it lay half on the floor. The last candle flickered out, and the oppressive presence receded. My heart thundered. I dropped to my knees, gasping in relief. For a moment it seemed I had succeeded in sealing the figure away with the destruction of the box. I was trembling too hard to even gather my thoughts properly. I closed my eyes, letting the hush fill me. Eventually, I forced myself to stand and approach the mirror. My reflection stared back, pale and unnerved, but it was only my own image. The figure was gone. Silence reigned in the once grand dining hall, broken only by the steady drip of water somewhere in the walls. I glanced at the shattered remains of the music box. A pang of sadness swept over me at the finality of the act, though relief overshadowed it. At last, I found the strength to shuffle away from that cursed object, leaving it in a broken heap. In the days that followed, everything seemed to return to normal in the estate. No more disembodied footsteps, no more half-seen shapes out of the corners of my eyes. The mirrors were once again lifeless, though a lingering anxiety kept me from removing most of the sheets I had placed over them. Over time, I packed away my uncle's journals, leaving them in a locked chest in the far corner of the library. The silence, however, was far from comforting. It held a tension as though the mansion itself were holding its breath. I decided to move out, certain I could never live in that house without being reminded of what lurked just beyond reflection. One evening, I began the process of carefully packing my belongings. While sorting through old books in my room, I heard a faint tinkling sound. At first I froze, convinced it was my imagination or memory. Then it chimed again, a single note, delicate but audible. My skin prickled. The broken box lay in fragments downstairs, yet I heard the lullaby again, slow and unmistakable. I crept down the staircase, breath hitching in my throat. The narrow corridor was bathed in weak lantern light, flickering against the wooden paneling. Drawn to the source of the music, I reached the dining hall. The destroyer's remnants of the box were exactly where I had left them, splintered pieces on the cold floor. Yet the lullaby emanated from somewhere behind me. Cautiously, I turned to face the massive mirror. My reflection was there, candle in hand, eyes wide. and behind me, reflected in perfect clarity, stood the figure. A silent shriek caught in my throat as I realized it was no longer pressing against the inside of the mirror. It was standing at my shoulder, occupying the same space as I. The hush was deafening, and the only melody came from the shards of what should have been a ruined music box. The reflection of the box in the mirror was whole again, spinning slowly. My body trembled. The pale figure lifted its head, and I saw a shadow of a smile form on its lips, as if mocking the final lines of the lullaby. The reflection parted from my own image, stepping forward in the glass, and its shape flickered in a ghostly merging of worlds. I tried to flee, but something heavy pressed on my limbs, and I could barely move my feet. A cold hand, or what felt like one, brushed against my shoulder, although no one stood there in reality. The sense of being tethered to the mirror seeped into every fiber of my being. I crashed to my knees, candle tumbling and guttering out. Darkness swallowed me, but in that final instant of dim reflection, I beheld the figure's face leaning low to mine, lips parted as though to deliver some lullaby of its own. To this day, I do not recall how I escaped the dining hall. All I know is that I found myself outside the manor, trembling under the wan moonlight, my breath steaming in the cold air. The estate behind me stood quiet, as though derelict. No light fell from its windows, and not even a rustle of wind could be heard in the surrounding trees. My belongings remained inside, but I could not bring myself to return and gather them. As I stood there, my knees weak, I realized I was not alone. A faint reflection flickered in a nearby window's glass, my silhouette overshadowed by a taller, paler form. Even outdoors, under the open sky, I felt the figure's presence, lingering in every reflective surface. My mind has tumbled through countless rationales since then. Did the destruction of the music box truly free that mirrored specter to roam at will, unbound to the attic's confines? Or had it merely renewed the link, forging something even more dreadful than before? Each day, I catch glimpses in store windows, water puddles, polished metal spoons. The pale figure stands behind me, watchful, patient, waiting for the lullaby to resume. This sense of inevitability claws at me, a knowledge that I can never fully outrun my reflection. Wherever I travel, the spectral presence is always with me, a silent occupant behind my eyes whenever I dare look at my own face in the glass. Sometimes, in the hushed hours before dawn, I wake to hear the lullaby again. Though I have destroyed the box, the notes remain inside my mind, an echo that will not fade. I lie in darkness, heart pounding, unable to resist the compulsion to peer toward any scrap of reflection, an unshaded window or a sliver of glass in a picture frame, and inevitably I see it there, the figure's pale visage melding with my own features, beckoning me once more to join it in that quiet, mirror-bounded realm. My only recourse is to cling to the feeble hope that the boundary between worlds is more resilient than my nightmares suggest. But as the notes drift through the quiet halls of my memory, I cannot unhear the siren call. In the hush that follows, I know it's only a matter of time before we meet again on the other side of the glass.